Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the EMAP Program Assessment Tool Overview. My name is Lindsay Schaefer. I am the EMAP Training Coordinator, and this webinar is really geared towards programs that are moving through the accreditation process, assessors, as well as accredited programs that are looking to move through the process again. Some of the feedback that we get from on-site assessments is really on the tool. How can you best optimize the tool so that it is useful for you and your program? And so we're going to hit on a lot of different components throughout the webinar today. If you have any questions as we're working through the webinar, please feel free to input them in the control panel of your webinar screen, and we will get to those questions at the end. This is just really what we're going to cover today. We're actually not going to be really using a PowerPoint. We're actually going to be working through the system using some credentials that would be similar to yours so that you can actually see what this would look like on your end. So feel free to follow along in the EMAP tool if you have credentials for that. We'll also talk about who typically has credentials, what process do you have to go through to get those credentials. So there's really 4 steps that we're going to cover today. We're going to kind of just provide an overview of the EMAP website for those that are not familiar. And then we're really going to dive into the program assessment tool. And we're actually going to work through 3 different areas. How to really conduct a programmatic gap analysis using the program assessment tool, how to conduct and submit your program self-assessment, and then how do assessors utilize the program assessment tool to assess programs. It's one of the unique elements of the tool that we have is that it is very catered to our needs. And so once we actually walk through this process from start to finish, you'll actually see how we use all of these components together so that we can have an end product that we utilize that eventually becomes the preliminary assessment report. So what I would like to do is just head to our website. And again, for those that are not familiar with our website, it's just www.emap.org. And for those that have credentials, you would just log in. Those that don't have credentials, you have access to our website, but it is not our full website. In order to get access to the website, you really have to go through one of two doors. You're either going to subscribe as a program, and at that point, you receive credentials as an applicant program and accreditation manager, and you can get access to the website there, or you go through training and you certify as either an accreditation manager or as an assessor. So that's typically what that process looks like. And feel free, I have my contact information at the end of the webinar to reach out to me if you have any questions. So just some basic things. When you go onto our website, for those that are not familiar with everything, our main page actually has a lot of really good information. If you scroll down, there's information on how you subscribe to EMAP, so you can actually start that process there. We also have all of our upcoming events, and you see quite a number of events that are coming up, including trainings, webinars. Our Pro Week is in September, so all of this is just sort of what's coming up in the next couple of months. And we do really try and keep this updated so that you can see what's going on. So again, if you have any questions about upcoming webinars or trainings, just let me know. When you log in, this is really where you get all of the access to our website. And if you have any issues logging in, for those that have been granted credentials, just let me know, and I'll work with you on that. So in logging in, there's a couple of things that you want to be aware of moving through this. So for programs, for those that are either accredited and going back through the process of reaccreditation, or programs that are going through for the first time, there's a tab just for programs that is really helpful. And a lot of that is found in the EM programs toolbox. And so you can see just some of the different documents that are in here. If you have any questions about the process, the Applicant's Guide to Accreditation is very thorough and contains a lot of very good information. So I encourage you guys to take a look at that. Also on here, we have the documents that you need to start the process. So in order to actually start the process as a program moving forward, you have to submit an application for assessment. You can download that here, and then you also have to send in the program request for on-site assessment and logistics worksheet. And that allows you to kind of identify dates where you would like to have assessors come on site. So those are two really critical documents there to start the process. And a lot of these other documents are just really helpful for you in terms of navigating through the process. Where can I go for additional resources? All of those kind of things. So, and again, remember on the right-hand side, those are our upcoming events. For assessors, very similarly, you also have a toolbox. And this contains some really good information for you prior to going out on an assessment. So one of the things that we ask our assessors to complete before every assessment is a code of conduct. So this is available for download so that you can read through that. We also have information on our travel policy, what we cover, what we don't, our updated reimbursement form, as well as some other documents here. Our draft document policy is really helpful to read through the style guide. So if you have any questions or want additional information, just let us know, but this is a really good starting point for those that are looking for a quick refresher. So once you've kind of navigated through our website, there's just a couple of things you want to be aware of. I know we have some folks that are assessors that have maybe a year or a couple of months in between when they go out on assessment. I want to just draw your attention to our training tab with our webinars. We have all of our recent webinars here, and we're actually also working on putting together our standard review webinars. And that's really just walking through, here are the elements of the standard, this is what it looks like. Here's some examples for different sectors. So we're working on that library as well. And that will also go underneath the training tab here. So just be on the lookout for those, but any live webinars that we have will be inputted on this training page. And this is available to subscribe programs as well as assessors. So once you're ready to dive into the program assessment tool, this is really what the main screen looks like. We do encourage you guys to fill out the contact details, even if you're just a program working through this for the first time. This just allows us to connect with you if you have any questions or any issues. So just let us know a little bit more about yourself. So as a program, looking to move forward or even just subscribe and learn more about this process, there's a lot of ways that you can leverage the EMAP assessment tool to help you out. So if you are just going in as a subscribe program, you're not an assessor, you're really just going to see three tabs. You're going to see the contact tab, the self-assessments tab, and the annual reports tab. And for this first exercise, kind of using the tool as a means of conducting a gap analysis of your program, you're really just going to pay attention to the self-assessment tool. So I've actually gone in and added a self-assessment, and it's really easy to do that. You just go in and you click what is pertinent. And for those that are on here from USAR resources, the process is exactly the same. So if you're a USAR resource, you're actually going to choose the USAR standard, while our EM programs are going to choose the 2016 to 2019 emergency management standard. Please don't focus on the 2013 to 2016. We're no longer using that standard. So once you have created a self-assessment, you're just going to open it up, and it is going to look really simple at first. It just basically has chapters 3 and 4. This is where the standards are located. And you really have to go in and open these up to do that. So we're actually going to work through one, and then I'm going to show you some examples of completed gap analyses. So one of the things that folks don't realize is that this tool can actually be used for more than just a self-assessment. It can actually be used to help you justify resources, funding, personnel, whatever it may be, if you're running into areas of non-compliance. And so that's really what I want to show you. So one of the first things that you want to do when you open up one of the standards, if you want to use this for the gap analysis part of it, is it's naturally going to go, it's naturally defaulting to no. So you're not compliant with the standards. So if that is true, you're actually just going to go down here and click Save Changes. And what it's going to do is it's going to make this box turn from red to yellow. It means that it's pending. You're going to notice that the Proof of Compliance tab is grayed out. That is actually only going to be available if you were to choose yes and then click Save Changes. We're going to work through that a little bit later in the webinar. But at this point, what you want to do is you want to go to the Corrective Action Plan. So this is really where you can input a lot of this information. One of the reasons why we require programs to go through training as part of the process is that if you just go in and you try and do this on your own, try and break apart the standard, try and make it fit, it's challenging because you don't know exactly what we're looking for. And so the training is really helpful in just getting you to understand what the standard elements are, what the assessors are measuring, what documentation we're looking for, and that sets the tone for conducting a gap analysis of your program. So in working through these, again, having that training is essential for success. And this is also something that the EMAP staff liaison that is assigned to your program will work with you on. We're always trying to start out with, where are your gaps? What does this look like? How much time is this going to take you? So this portion of the EMAP assessment tool is really helpful in building out a plan of action moving forward. So the first question that we see starting out is, why are you non-compliant? So you've said that you're non-compliant. So what are you not compliant with? And we're going to work through this together. So we'll just say, for this strategic plan, we have an executive policy, we have mission, goals, objectives, and milestones, a method for plan implementation, as well as a method and schedule for evaluation, maintenance, and revision. What we are lacking is that the strategic plan was developed with input from stakeholders. So really, I'm just going to enter in here, the multi-year strategic plan was not developed with input from stakeholders. So you're going to use the same logic throughout this. So what is going to have to happen in order for me to make sure that the strategic plan was developed with input from stakeholders? Well, I need to identify the appropriate stakeholders. I need to gather the stakeholders together and solicit their input. I need to collect pertinent documentation of their input. Can be meeting minutes, for instance, revisions, suggested revisions, etc. So that's really what I need to accomplish. So who's responsible for that? You're going to see throughout this webinar, I'm using a lot of fake Star Wars themes. So we're just going to use Roberta Kling, who is the director of the Endor Moon Emergency Management Agency. How long is it going to take to complete this? I'd say, just for kicks and giggles, 4 weeks. So we'll say the due date here would be March 12th. We'll say that. We don't really need any additional personnel for this. This is pretty simple, just gathering folks together. Total man hours to complete, I'd probably say maybe 40 hours. For this purpose, we don't really need any additional equipment. So I'm just going to put not applicable there. Any additional funding? Nope, don't need any of that. So once you're done, you click Save Changes. And then at that point, there's one more step that you have to take, and this is the same for both the self-assessment part of it. You have to go to the Review tab and click Section Completed before this is finalized. And what I've actually done for this is I've actually gone through and filled out all of these so that you can kind of see this. And you'll notice this was the last one that I had to click Section Completed and then Save Changes for this Submit Assessment option was available. You're not, for the corrective action planning and the gap analysis, you're not going to submit your assessment at this point. It's only after you have provided documentation for each standard element that you're actually going to click Submit Assessment. And that is typically done about a month or 2 months out from your on-site assessment. We have a standard of 3 weeks prior to, but it's helpful to be a little bit more proactive as you go through it. So I want to walk you through another standard just to kind of show you what it looks like if you were compliant. And this is often one that is easily addressed by a program because it's just really talking about having a designated emergency management agency, department, or office established and empowered with the authority to administer the program. So for this, I said that we were compliant. So I'm going to actually walk you back through this and show you what it looks like. So really for this, instead of just defaulting to the no, I said, yep, we're compliant with this standard. Just because I'm doing a gap analysis of my program, I'm not inputting any documentation. I just want to be able to have something that I can go back to say, yes, we're done with that one. I'm just focusing on the non-compliant element. So there's one way that you can really use this to walk through your self-assessment. The other one I want to show you, kind of going a little bit further into this, is Standard 445, which deals with continuity of operations plans. And I want to show you kind of what a little bit of the end product looks like. I'll show you the report and what is generated. But if you look at the standard, I'm looking that the program has identified continuity of operations plans for each organization performing essential program functions. We define essential program functions in the standard, but I'm looking for all 7 of these elements within the COOP plan. So when you actually go through and you look, this is completed. So this is what the review page looks like. When you've said, yep, it's non-compliant, this is what I need to do. So we can see the reason that it was non-compliant, that there were no departmental COOPs provided or available for the program. So there were a couple of steps and actions that were needed. Have to identify departments with essential program functions, have to purchase COOP software, develop a COOP template, work with identified departments with essential program functions to develop those COOP plans, and then ultimately enter that data into the COOP software. So we see who it was assigned to. It's going to take a bit to complete this, about 1.5 years, to walk through the entire process. Due date is set. It was identified that an additional person was needed to assist with this. Total man hours that would be needed, identified the need for COOP software as an additional need. And I believe for this, I don't think it's necessarily reflected here, but they were saying that they would need about $25,000 to purchase the new equipment, not considering how much it would cost for that additional person to be in the office helping that out. So again, this is a really good way of being able to justify your needs working through this process. So at the end of the day, you can actually go up to the reports tab and download this report. And so this is really the benefit of it, is if you actually walk through the tool and do your full gap analysis, you end up with a plan that you can then submit to show what your gaps are as a program. So we're just going to wait for this to download. I will note, as this is downloading, there's actually 2 different reports that you can download. The compliance plan is really that plan, what's missing. And then the status report is, where do we stand? What's compliant, what's non-compliant at this point in time? So I'm going to show you this. And this is a little out of order. You just sort of have to manipulate a little bit just to make sure that the standards kind of follow each other. But you can kind of see, you know, what is the reason for non-compliance? There was no advisory committee. What's the steps or actions needed? Any additional equipment? And then in a matrix up here, it has really more specifics as to what is needed, who is responsible, how much time, all of that stuff. So I encourage you guys to utilize it for this purpose, because it does give you a really good format for moving forward and being able to present areas that are non-compliant and justify resources that are needed. So that's just one resource that is available for you. I'll show you just what this compliance status one looks like. This is a lot simpler than the other one, but you can just basically see, yes, it's compliant, no, it's not compliant. Again, you have to reorganize this a little bit, but you have a really good idea at that point as to where you stand as a program. So that's just another useful tip for you moving forward. I will show you guys once we get into more of the self-assessment. I have updated some proofs of compliance, but this is really what you start to put together when you're uploading documentation into the system. So again, this process was just to show you some of the resources that are available to you to help you justify your program and the needs that you have in order to move forward with the assessment. So at this point, I am going to actually transition out of Leah Ortana's EMAP portal, and I'm actually going to move into another one just to show you how the self-assessment works. Just give me a minute here. We're actually going to be using the same process, but it's just going to look a little bit different because we're actually focusing on uploading documentation, submitting a proof of compliance report, which is really more of a crosswalk between your documentation and the standard elements. How are you compliant? So we're going to open up some of these just so that you can see a little bit between what we're looking at. So one of the things that is offered once you decide to move forward and you're submitting documentation into the self-assessment is you have to select an application. And I showed you just where that document is. We have two different types of applications. We have a classic application and an enhanced application. The classic application is really geared for programs that have assessors on site. There's a lot of expertise surrounding the standard embedded in your team. Very familiar with what this looks like. You yourself as an accreditation manager have been out on an assessment. You just have some good background and you're really just managing this process on your end. And we as EMAP staff liaisons just facilitate the process, arrange the team, the assessors, all of that, and then bring them out for the on-site assessment. The enhanced application is a little bit more in depth. It does cost a little bit more, and the applicant's guide to accreditation has all of those costs laid out. But with the enhanced application, the benefit to you as a program is that as you are working through your self-assessment, you can actually upload documentation into the tool. I then would take a look at it and we would walk through it just to make sure that you're understanding each element of the standard and you're capturing that in documentation. I'm really going to go in and validate your proof of compliance report to make sure that it is sound and it addresses all of the elements. And I'm going to walk you through an example of this just so you can kind of see what we're looking at. So very similar to what I did with a corrective action plan, I'm going to walk you through what it looks like to upload documentation. So remember, the default for the tool is that you're non-compliant. So because you're entering documentation, you are coming out and you are saying, yes, we are compliant. So once you click on that, you notice the corrective action plan tab is no longer available. It's really the proof of compliance that we're looking at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a document here, and then I'm going to show it to you just so that you have a really good idea. Give me a minute to get there. So I'm going to put in what we call a supplemental proof of compliance report. And this is typically done after the assessment, but I'm just using this as an example. So for this is just a proof of compliance report. Let me actually open that up for you so you have an idea as to what I'm talking about. I want to show you that there's more than one way to include information. So you see here, this is just a cover sheet for your documentation. So for this, you are providing the End or Moon Operating Policy 157 that really includes that records retention and destruction policy. So here is the standard language that is pulled from the second sentence of Standard 494. You want to say that the length of time training records will be maintained as specified. That is actually done within the End or Moon Operating Policy 157, and then provide some detail as to when the sign-in sheet, certificates, course evaluations, and training curriculum will be retained and then destroyed. So this is one way to document how your documentation meets the elements of the standard. The other way that you can actually do it is through the tool itself. So I'm going to upload this, and then I'm going to upload the other document, just so you can see that. So we're just going to upload this administrative policy. So there's a couple things that you can do within the system. So once this uploads, you're going to identify the type. Is it a document? Is it written? Is it an interview? Is it a demonstration? So for this, it's written. And remember, for every standard element, we need to see written documentation. Interviews and demonstrations can supplement that written documentation, but ultimately we need documentation there. So I want to list the proof of compliance. So it's the End or Moon Administrative Policy 157. There's more to that title. And then really, what's my rationale at this point? So how does this demonstrate compliance with the second sentence of 494? So the End or Moon Administrative Policy 157 states that sign-in sheets, training curriculum, course evaluations, I'll just say end course evaluations, will be retained for 3 years and then destroyed. So that's my rationale. Really providing just some description for the length of time training records will be maintained, and then specifically what are those items that will be retained for 3 years and then destroyed. So at this point, you're just going to click Save Changes, and what you will end up seeing back on this page, this was the original Proof of Compliance report, and here is the second one. So you're actually going to upload documentation for each element of the standard. So you see we've really only addressed this sentence. We would want to see documentation for this first sentence as well, all combined within this. So there's really 2 ways that you can use the program assessment tool. You can either upload your documentation and provide your rationale for each of the documents, just like what we did with the administrative policy, or you can have that cover sheet for the documentation that walks the assessors through your documentation, and then leave the rationales blank here. We don't really care how you do it, but providing that rationale, that crosswalk, is really essential. And it's essential for 2 reasons. It's not just essential for assessors, but also for me as a staff liaison. I go in before I open up the program assessment tool to the assessors to make sure that all of your documentation is in there. You have documentation for every standard element. And if I notice that we have a whole bunch of non-compliance, or you've just not uploaded documentation, that's going to raise a red flag. And I will come and ask questions at that point. We really try and ensure that the assessments are beneficial for programs, but also for our assessors. So that's sort of our main focus there. Once I have confirmed that you do have documentation for every standard element, at that point, I'm going to release it to the assessors to take a look at. Now, one of the things that you want to do, and kind of backing up a little bit before we get assessors involved, very similar to what you had to do for the corrective action plan, you have to go to that review tab and click section completed and then save changes in order for this to go green. And all of these boxes have to be green for every single one of these standards in order to submit your assessment. So it's after you have submitted all of your documentation and you have reviewed that you want to walk through that process. So I want to walk you through 332 as well, just to kind of show you what a fully compliant self-assessment looks like. Had a lot of documentation that I put into here. So here, you can kind of see the different documentation, and this is one where I really just inputted the documentation and then provided a rationale for each of these. I know this might be a little difficult to see, but really what I'm looking at is, here's the Endor Moon Emergency Operations Plan. Why do I have it? Why am I presenting you with the Emergency Operations Plan? Well, it describes the roles and responsibilities of the Endor Emergency Management Advisory Committee, and it also states that the advisory committee meets twice a year. So when you look at this standard up here, the advisory committee meets with a frequency determined by the emergency management program to provide for regular input. So this is establishing a frequency. And then really from there, I'm going to be looking at documentation that shows me that that advisory committee actually meets twice a year. So we see there's an agenda from January of 2017, as well as a sign-in sheet. And there should be meeting minutes in here as well. There should be. And then also an agenda and a sign-in sheet, as well as meeting minutes from June of 2017. So it looks like the meeting minutes were not uploaded for January of 2017. That's an easy fix. The other thing that we see here is that there is a potential for an interview with the director of the Endor Moon Emergency Management Agency. So that is another thing that you could put in there. When we got to the type portion of it, when you were entering the documentation themselves, you can actually choose interview or demonstration and provide that as well. And this is what it looks like on the back end. So this is once you've actually completed that process. So the thing that's really beneficial, if you choose to go this route versus having that cover sheet, is you can actually download a report that has all of the proofs of compliance in it. And so some programs choose to do this and then print this out and provide this for the assessors. Again, it's a little jumbled when it comes out, but this is something that you can easily play with a little bit just to make sure that it's in order. So you can see, I'll scroll down to where we have 332. So you see, here's standard 332, and then here's all of the documents that were provided as well as the comments working down through this. So this is another route that you take if you want to use the tool. Other than that, having some type of a proof of compliance report, something similar to this, is another way you can do this. So just something for you to think about as you're moving through that process. So the really neat thing about the tool is, again, it is customized, but anything that you are uploading into the system as part of your self-assessment, once you submit your assessment, the tool flips. And I want to show you what it looks like on the assessor's end. So just give me a minute to log back in. And so for assessors, if you just have assessor credentials, the only tabs you're going to see is expertise, availability, and review assignments. So expertise, this is really important. This is really where you come out and you say, here are the areas that I feel very comfortable in assessing. And then your availability, when am I available to go on an assessment? Assessments are actually week-long. You arrive on Sunday, you fly out on Friday. So we're looking at week-long availability. And that's really how we build teams. It's based on who is available and the areas of expertise that they have. So once you are selected for an assessment, everything is confirmed, you are assigned this. So Leah Organa has been assigned to be an assessor for the Indoor Moon Emergency Management Agency. And so once I assign that, she then has access to their self-assessment. So we're actually going to walk through just some of the tabs that we just saw. So we were playing a little bit with 332. So as an assessor going in, all of these boxes are red, and they don't change colors until you really start working through the program assessment tool. And again, you're going to see this is very similar to the layout that we saw with both the corrective action plan as well as the self-assessment. So as an assessor, this is really what you see first. This is where you enter in your findings. You have access to their documentation in the Proof Documents tab. So anything that they have inputted is available here. You can download each of these, and then their program data also contains any information that they have uploaded. So again, if you were to download that Proof of Compliance report, this should be very similar, if not exact, to what you see here. So again, another just easy way of looking at that. But really what I go ahead and do 2 weeks in advance of the on-site assessment is I go into the areas that I'm assigned and start familiarizing myself with their documentation. Again, the assessments are a week long, but there's really only about 3.5 days where assessors have time to really look through the documentation. So the more that you can familiarize yourself in advance, the better. It reduces the learning curve that is involved on Monday. So you can see any documentation that they're putting in here, you have easy access to. Now, we do encourage assessors to write their findings in Microsoft Word or some other word processing system, and then really copy and paste their findings over into this. It being technology, it's easy to forget to refresh or to save changes and you lose your progress. So it's helpful to keep it in some other platform and then transfer it over once you have completed it. So with the assessor's key findings, really what you're looking for is this information. So very similar to the self-assessment, I want to see that the advisory committee meets with a frequency determined by the program. So where do we see that frequency? What is that frequency? How have they implemented that frequency? That's really what I'm looking for. So one of the things that you'll see is the same sentence throughout. Based on the documentation review, the program is found to be compliant or non-compliant. Compliant or non-compliant with standard 332. So this is the first sentence for every finding, and then really after that provides in-depth information as to why the program is either compliant or non-compliant, or a little bit of both. Oftentimes with non-compliance, the issue that we see is that it may be one standard element that is non-compliant, but there are other elements that are compliant. There's no percentage with these. 95% doesn't meet the cut. You either have it or you don't. It's meant to be very black and white. So the assessor's findings are all inputted into here, and any documentation that is referenced for compliance, again, remember we need to have documentation for each standard element, is then referenced here. You just scroll down a little bit, and then at the end, you click Save Changes. But I will note here, once you click Save Changes, it doesn't mean that it goes green. And there's a reason for that. So you want to go to the Review tab, very similar to that again. You have to mark the section completed. And again, that will include the findings as well as the documents you referenced. And then at that point, you see that the second read tab has been ungraded. So this is actually part of our process of quality assurance during the on-site assessment. So each assessor is given a couple of standards that they're responsible for aligned with their expertise. They then have a second assignment called a second read, where they actually go and they double check and make sure that the original assessor addressed all of the standard elements of each standard and provided documentation. So whoever goes back through and answers these can either put yes or no, and then any comments that they have, and then it will naturally show up here, and they would click Save Changes. And so that really completes the process for each of the standards. One thing that I will mention, this platform is excellent in the sense that it allows a number of people to review findings. So you not only have your second read assessor that looks at your findings, you also have the assessment team leader that is on site, as well as the EMAP staff liaison. And the big thing that we really promote in terms of on-site findings is that it's easier to address areas of non-compliance on site when the documentation is all in front of you, rather than having to go back during the supplemental period that follows the on-site assessment to try and gather that documentation and remember what you talked about with program personnel. So that's always just something that we really encourage. The other thing I want to show you is just how, what a compliant finding would look like, as well as a non-compliant finding. So here, what I have done for 494 is actually inputted a finding, and it's a compliant finding. You get a good idea as to what this looks like. So program provided proof documentation. Funny enough, we uploaded that into Han Solo's self-assessment. So whatever is uploaded there shows up here. And then for the assessor findings, this is really what I am going to move over. So you see, same first sentence, based on the documentation review, the program is found to be compliant, and then walks through how they are compliant. And then at the bottom, they then reference any documentation that was used for compliance. Now, they're not done yet. We see that it is just a yellow box. So what you'd have to do is go to the Review tab, mark the section as completed, it's going to be slow on me. Sorry about that, guys. Mark it as completed, click Save, and again, that would open up the second read tab for somebody to go in, review the finding, and then provide a comment if necessary. So this is really what a compliant finding looks like. You see this lovely little green check mark. For non-compliant findings, you're going to see this red X. And so again, this is what a non-compliant finding looks like. You will see very similar layout. It's just, no, they're not compliant. And then really the format of the non-compliant finding is just a little bit different. We see the same first sentence, but it's really after that first sentence where you see why the program is non-compliant. So program was found non-compliant with the standard for the following reasons. We needed documentation for the program's resource management system and how it addresses the hazards identified in standard 411, and we needed to see accounting procedures for a specific system that was being used. But you notice here, from this point on, this is actually the areas that were found compliant. So they were just really focused, the non-compliance was just on two of the non-compliant standard elements, but they were compliant with the rest of it. And all of the documentation that was referenced is found here. So again, very similar process. Again, I really do encourage the use of Microsoft Word or some other word processing feature to document findings. And again, you go to the Review tab, click Section Completed, click Save. It opens up the second read option. And you'll notice here on the left-hand side that the red X is still going to be there. That signifies that it is, in fact, a non-compliant finding. The green symbolizes that it has gone through the entire process from start to finish. It is ultimately the assessment team leader's responsibility to submit the review of the on-site assessment findings once everything has been completed. So the assessment team leader actually tracks the initial finding as well as the second read finding on either a whiteboard or a piece of flip chart paper in the assessment room, and then it should be seen here as well. So once they've walked through that entire process and everything is green here, doesn't matter what it looks like here, if it's a green check mark or a red X, but here is really what's important. They'll click Submit Review, and then that will actually flip the tool again. And what happens is then the program is able to submit supplemental documentation for any areas of non-compliance that was discovered on site, and allows the assessors to look at any supplemental documentation that is uploaded and also provide a finding. It's the same exact process that was used for both the self-assessment as well as the on-site assessment process used by assessors. So again, it is a very unique system. And at the end of the day, what we do as staff liaisons is we download all of these findings into an assessment report. And these assessment reports are anywhere from about 80 to 120 pages long. We have to do a lot with formatting on the back end, but that's just something that we do. That's part of the process. And this does take a little bit for it to download just because it's downloading a number of standards and their findings. We also do have some other elements here. The briefing charts are predominantly used by the assessment team leader. They conduct a daily briefing as well as a final exit briefing on Friday before they leave. This process is really meant to keep the accreditation managers in the loop as to the progress of the assessment team and the areas that are compliant or non-compliant. So this is just a tool for the assessment team leader to use to capture the status of compliance throughout this process. Again, proofs of compliance, this is what the program submits, so that's another cover sheet that the assessors can use. But this is ultimately what is generated. And so for those that are accredited programs, you'll see a layout very similar to what you see on the screen, but it captures where the program stands. So what is compliant, what isn't. I didn't fill out all of these in the assessment. It was really just the one that they were found compliant with in 494. The rest were not completed yet. And then let me actually move down. So here's 461. And again, we do a lot with formatting on our end, but you see who the primary assessor was in the tool, what their finding was, compliant or non-compliant, and then actually walks through their findings. So again, this covers multiple pages, and it's not exactly perfect coming out of the tool, so that's why we have work on the back end. And pulling that together, and you see the reference documents here. This all shows up, and the same thing with 49. 494, primary assessor, it was found to be compliant, and then here is the information. So we do encourage assessors to use the style guide that we have, and I always encourage programs moving through this process to take a look at that, because that is really the formatting that the assessors are using when they're writing their findings. And that's something that I look for as a staff liaison, just to make sure that all of the findings are using the same formatting and it's an easy read from start to finish. So that is really what the process looks like from start to finish. Again, it's a very unique system. And if you ever have any questions working through the program assessment tool, just let us know. We're really good about troubleshooting and figuring out what might be the issue. We do encourage you guys not to use Internet Explorer when you are trying to navigate through the program assessment tool. It is not very friendly to our tool. We typically find that Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, and Safari are pretty good in using the tool. But again, we're more than happy to troubleshoot any issues that you have. And as I mentioned before, the EMAP program assessment tool is really for programs that have subscribed and are interested in moving through with the process, our assessors, as well as our accredited programs that are going through reaccreditation. It's the same process. And I can't stress enough for our accredited programs, reaccreditation is a little bit of a misnomer. It's really just accreditation for the next 5 years. So it's the same process that you use every 5 years to upload and submit your self-assessment. We do have some services available to programs that are interested in moving forward. These are associated with our subscriptions. So with the subscription, you get access to our standard review webinars. And again, we're building out that library as we speak. We also have live webinars that we offer monthly. You get access to that program assessment tool so you can start doing your gap analysis and figure out where you stand in terms of the standards. We also try and connect you to other accreditation managers. If you have a question specifically about one of the standards or a grouping of the standards, we like to put you in touch with folks that have a good amount of experience overcoming some of those challenges. So we try and connect you there. And then we always provide opportunities for programs to host trainings as well as to have training and standard orientation workshops. Training and standard orientation workshops are helpful in the sense that they provide a program with an opportunity to bring their stakeholders together and really work through the standard, identify documentation, and then ultimately develop a plan of action moving forward from the training. We do have a webinar scheduled in March, specifically looking at hazard mitigation and how to assess and write findings. Once we get to April and May, we will be doing some webinars on how to write a rationale. So how do you get to that point where you're inputting something into the program assessment tool, as well as how to write findings. So you have a good idea moving forward. So please come back and check our website. That has the best and most updated information about upcoming webinars and trainings. So here is my information. This is my phone number. If you have any questions or want more information on upcoming trainings and subscriptions, just let me know. So I'd like to thank you guys for coming out and attending the webinar today. At this point, I will take any questions.